Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're re-diving deep into one of the most epic sagas in all of Greek mythology, the 12 Labors of Heracles. You might know him as Hercules, the strongest man who ever lived, but his story is so much more than just brute strength. It's a tale of tragedy, redemption, and facing impossible odds. So, how did this all start? Well, it begins with a terrible, dark moment. Heracles, in a fit of madness, sent by the goddess Hera, who, by the way, held a lifelong grudge against him because he was Zeus's illegitimate son, committed an unthinkable act. When the madness cleared, he was horrified to discover what he had done. Devastated and seeking to atone for his actions, he traveled to the oracle at Delphi. The oracle's command was clear. Heracles must serve his cousin, King Eurystheus of Mycenae, for 12 years and complete any 10 labors the king set for him. Eurystheus, a man who was both cowardly and jealous of Heracles' fame, devised a series of tasks so dangerous, so impossible, that he was certain Heracles would never return. Little did he know, he was about to create a legend. And so, with a heavy heart but a determined spirit, Heracles set off on his first great challenge, his first labor: slay the Nemean lion. Now, this wasn't just any lion. It was a monstrous beast. Its golden fur was impervious to all weapons, arrows, swords, spears, you name it. It was said to be an offspring of the monsters Typhon and Echidna, and it had been terrorizing the countryside around Nemean. Heracles arrived and quickly realized his usual weapons were useless. Arrows just bounced off the lion's hide. His sword couldn't even scratch it. This was a battle of wits as much as strength. Heracles tracked the creature to its lair, which had 2 entrances. Thinking strategically, he blocked one of the entrances, trapping the lion inside with him. Now it was just man versus beast. With no weapons to help him, Heracles relied on his bare hands. He wrestled the monstrous lion, locking it in a chokehold with his incredible strength. The beast thrashed and fought, but it was no match for the son of Zeus. After a mighty struggle, Heracles squeezed the life out of the lion. But the labor wasn't over. He had to bring back the lion's skin as proof. The problem? He couldn't skin it. The hide was too tough. Then, a brilliant idea struck him. He used the lion's own razor-sharp claws to cut through its impenetrable skin. Heracles then wore the lion's hide as a cloak and its head as a helmet, creating his most iconic look and a near-invincible suit of armor. When he returned to Mycenae and threw the skin at Eurystheus' feet, the king was so terrified that he hid in a large bronze jar. From then on, he refused to meet Heracles face to face, sending his commands through a herald instead. 1 down, 11 to go. Fresh off his victory against the lion, Heracles was immediately given his second labor, and it was a doozy: slay the Lernaean Hydra. This wasn't just a monster, it was a living nightmare. The Hydra was a gigantic, serpent-like water beast that lived in the swamps of Lerna. It had numerous heads, and here's the kicker: for every head you chopped off, 2 more would grow back in its place. To make matters even worse, its central head was immortal, and its breath was pure poison. Heracles didn't go alone this time. He brought his loyal nephew, Iolaus, along for help. They found the Hydra in its foul-smelling swamp lair. Heracles charged in, swinging his club and sword, slicing off heads left and right. But just as the legend said, for every one he severed, 2 more sprouted, hissing and snapping. The battle seemed hopeless. He was being overwhelmed by a writhing mass of serpents. This is where teamwork came in. Heracles called out to Iolaus with a plan. As Heracles sliced off a head, Iolaus would immediately take a burning torch and cauterize the stump, searing the wound so that no new heads could grow. They worked in perfect sync, a whirlwind of sword and fire. Head by head, they systematically destroyed the monster. Finally, only the immortal head remained. Heracles sliced it off with his sword, but knowing it could not be killed, he buried it deep under a massive rock, where it supposedly still lies, hissing to this day. His labor wasn't quite over, though. In a move that would prove useful later, he dipped his arrows in the Hydra's poisonous blood, making them incredibly deadly. But when Heracles returned, Eurystheus refused to count the labor. Why? Because he claimed Heracles had help from Iolaus. So, despite his incredible feat, he still had 10 labors to go. A frustrating setback, but Heracles was not one to give up. For his third labor, Eurystheus decided to move away from monstrous beasts and give Heracles a task that required speed and endurance, not just strength. The challenge: capture the Cyrenian hind and bring it back alive. This wasn't just any deer. It was a magnificent creature with golden antlers, which is unusual for a female deer, and hooves of bronze. It was sacred to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, and it was faster than a speeding arrow. To harm it in any way would incur the wrath of the goddess herself. Capturing it alive and unharmed was a monumental test of patience. Heracles couldn't just fight it, he had to outlast it. And so began one of the longest pursuits in history. For an entire year, Heracles chased the hind across the lands of Greece. Through forests, over mountains, across rivers, the chase was relentless. The hind never tired, and Heracles could not give up. Finally, after a full year of pursuit, the hind, exhausted, sought refuge on Mount Artemisian. Some versions say Heracles managed to capture it in a net as it slept. Others say he lightly wounded it with an arrow in the leg, just enough to slow it down without drawing too much blood, and then captured it. As he was carrying the magnificent creature back to Mycenae, he ran into none other than the goddess Artemis and her brother, Apollo. Artemis was furious that he had dared to capture her sacred animal, but Heracles, ever respectful to the gods, humbly explained his situation. He told her about his quest for atonement and that he was acting under the orders of Eurystheus, promising to return the hind as soon as the king had seen it. Seeing his sincerity and understanding his plight, Artemis forgave him and let him pass. Heracles presented the living hind to Eurystheus, completed his labor, and then, as promised, set it free. 3 labors down, and now for the 4th, capture the Erymanthian boar. This was another monstrous beast, a giant, ferocious boar that lived on Mount Erymanthos and was rampaging through the countryside, destroying crops and terrorizing villagers. Heracles' task was to capture this beast alive, their assignment designed to be nearly impossible. On his way to the mountain, Heracles stopped to visit his friend Pholus, a wise and gentle centaur. Pholus offered Heracles a meal, but Heracles, being a good guest, asked for some wine. Here's where things went wrong. Pholus had a special cask of wine, a gift from Dionysus to all the centaurs, meant to be opened only when they were all together. When Pholus opened it, the incredible aroma spread across the mountainside, attracting the other, more wild and aggressive centaurs. They stormed Pholus's home, armed with rocks and fir trees, demanding the wine. A massive brawl broke out. Heracles, defending himself and his host, was forced to use his hydra-poisoned arrows. He drove the centaurs off, but tragedy struck. His wise friend Pholus, curious about the arrows, picked one up, accidentally dropped it on his foot, and died instantly from the hydra's venom. Heracles was heartbroken to have lost his friend in such a senseless way. Saddened but resolute, he continued his quest. Following the advice of another wise centaur, Chiron, Heracles found the boar. Instead of confronting it head-on, he used his cleverness. He shouted and made a racket, driving the boar up the mountain and into a deep snowbank. The massive beast, trapped and exhausted by the thick snow, was easily subdued. Heracles bound it, hoisted it onto his mighty shoulders, and began the long walk back to Mycenae. Imagine the sight, the great hero Heracles carrying a giant, snarling boar on his back. When he arrived and presented it to Eurystheus, the cowardly king was yet again so terrified that he jumped into his bronze storage jar to hide. For impossible tasks completed, but the journey for redemption was far from over. And that's where we'll leave Heracles for today. What an incredible start to his legendary labors. Join us next time for part 2, where we'll cover the Augean stables, the Stymphalian birds, and more. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into Greek mythology, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. See you then.